now time for oral questions. The member from Fort Hill.
Thank you very much, Speaker. My question is to the Deputy Premier. 10 days ago, our leader Tim Hudak in the Ontario PC caucus voted against a budget that did nothing to save Ontario from a $30 billion deficit, from further debt and more unemployment. We took that stand because we are worried about the future of our province. We took that stand because you did not take the urgent action that our province needs. Yesterday's S&P negative outlook throws your government's incompetence in managing our province into high relief, Deputy Premier. In fact, Kevin O'Leary on the Lang and O'Leary exchange yesterday had this to say regarding the downgrading, and I'm quoting, "This is further evidence that this government is probably past its shelf life," unquote. With all indications to the contrary, can you still stand up here and claim that you and your budget are what Ontario needs?
Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, first of all, Standard & Poor's affirmed the credit rating and put Ontario on a negative outlook, and they cited the challenge of meeting our deficit targets, which this government's prepared to embrace, and we want to meet those targets, obviously. We welcome the independent analysis, which cited, among other factors, a number of great strengths that this economy has, Mr. Speaker, a number of challenges we have, including the global economy, including, in their words, this fact that we are in a minority parliament, Mr. Speaker. And that's why we hope that we can work together on issues in the future to continue to meet those targets. We adopted a number of initiatives in the budget which I think are certainly consistent with Conservative points of view, and I look forward to hearing from other agencies. These are not easy things, but I think Ontarians are prepared to embrace the challenge in front of us. We've laid out a plan to get us back to balance, Mr. Speaker. The expense challenges are real, but we will meet them.
I think the Deputy Premier may get his wish in hearing from other agencies. Standard & Poor's negative outlook on Ontario is an indictment of this government's performance and of its fiscal plan. On April 4th this year, this finance minister himself said, and I'm quoting, "We're worried about costs when we have a proposal to raise taxes and expenditures," Duncan told reporters. That's one thing that, in my view, given what the demands of the credit agencies are, we have to be very cautious about. That's not what credit agencies are looking for. End of quote. Really? Our party and our leader have repeatedly called on your government to correct your course. You refused because you just didn't get it, Deputy Premier. Do you get it now? Or are you going to wait till we get downgraded and interest rates make your budget completely obsolete?
Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, in fact, Standard & Poor's affirmed the rating for the next 2 years. Exactly. And they're looking to this legislature to meet those challenges, Mr. Speaker. They cited a number of great strengths in the Ontario economy, which we concur with, and they quite correctly cited the challenges that we are faced with. And so we welcome their unbiased, balanced perspective on what is happening. We will likely hear from other agencies in the near future. We will welcome their advice as well, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to report that Ontario's debt continues to be among the most in-demand debt in the world because it's seen as strong debt, Mr. Speaker. There are real challenges, Mr. Speaker, on the expenditure side, and this government is committed to dealing with those challenges, Mr. Speaker. We're doing that, and we will meet the challenge.
The member from Bruce Grey, Owen Sound. The member from Bruce Grey, Owen Sound will come to order. Your question.
Let's review, Deputy Premier, what Standard & Poor's actually had to say yesterday, and I'm quoting again. "We believe the province's main credit challenges include its continuing weak and budgetary metrics and its challenging cost containment plan required to achieve budgetary balance by fiscal 2018. End of quote. Deputy Premier, this is the second credit rating agency in 4 months to put you on negative credit watch. If we want to get our economy moving again to create jobs, you must get our fiscal house in order. You responded to the last negative credit outlook by stubbornly doubling down on the same failed path. How do you intend to respond this time?
Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, by implementing the budget and the fiscal plan we have laid out, by attempting to work in this legislature in a minority parliament, Mr. Speaker, to address the very real challenges that face this economy that have built up over many years, Mr. Speaker. One simply has to look at the history of debt accumulation in Ontario to see where and when it happened, Mr. Speaker. These numbers are all well understood. I will remind you that the Globe and Mail reminds us this morning they called the Leader of the Opposition the forgotten man of Queen's Park because of the very
what's his name again?
The very wrong response to the need for this legislature, Mr. Speaker, to work together in challenging times. The plan we've laid out is the right plan, Mr. Speaker. Standard & Poor's quite properly says we have to meet the spending targets.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, we will do that with or without the help of the opposition.
The member from Thurrock.
Back to the Deputy Premier. This is not the first time that Standard & Poor's has issued a very direct warning to your government. In the summer of 2009, Standard & Poor's put us on negative watch. In the fall of 2009, they downgraded Ontario. Now in the spring of 2012, they put Ontario on negative watch again. In their move yesterday, they issued a stern warning to the Premier, and I'm quoting, "The negative outlook reflects our view that there is at least a 1 in 3 likelihood that we could lower the long-term rating 1 notch. We warned you last week that a 1% increase in interest rates means $500 million wiped away to service a $280 billion debt." Will the Deputy Premier finally listen? What are you prepared to do to make sure we avoid a further downgrade to Ontario's credit rating?
Thank you, Deputy Premier.
You know, Mr. Speaker, again, I want to remind the people of Ontario that Standard & Poor's affirmed our credit rating, Mr. Speaker. They did not affirm the credit rating of the United States. They did not affirm the credit rating of France. There's a variety of other jurisdictions they did not affirm the credit rating. We take their advice very seriously, Mr. Speaker. The member is right. At the depth of the most recent recession, they did put us on negative outlook. And, Mr. Speaker, as they did with virtually every jurisdiction in North America that doesn't have oil, doesn't have natural gas, and doesn't have potash. The challenges to our economy are real. I think the people of Ontario expect the members of this legislature to work together in a minority situation, not to play games, not to ring bells, Mr. Speaker, not to not show up and do the people's business.
Thank you.
We look forward to working with both parties in this legislature as we move.
Speaker, yesterday, and I see again today, this finance minister was quick to do what he always does. He points the blame anywhere else. But there is no one left to blame, Speaker. Standard & Poor's was clear. This is your responsibility, sir. And I'm quoting, "Ontario's large budgetary deficits since the recession have significantly boosted the debt burden." Unquote. It's black and white, Deputy Premier. Your uncontrollable spending, your debt is what got us into this mess. Will your government
I accept responsibility that we stepped in and helped save General Motors and Chrysler, Mr. Speaker. I accept responsibility that we accelerated capital projects across the province, Mr. Speaker, to build more hospitals that needed to be built, to build new roads that needed to be built, Mr. Speaker, to build municipal infrastructure, to put people to work at a time when jobs were scarce, Mr. Speaker. It is now time to get that deficit back. We have brought it down. We have exceeded our targets, as Standard & Poor's pointed out in each of the first 3 years. I welcome their advice. We embrace it. We're prepared to continue to make the right choices for the best future for Ontario.
Final supplementary.
Well, you do have to get the deficit under control. We've been telling you that. Now they're telling you that. When are you going to listen? Without a doubt, yesterday's decision is an indictment of your government's fiscal policy. The verdict is in, Deputy Premier. Tax hikes and irresponsible spending will not get Ontario moving out of this economic downturn. Now, more than ever, you need to change your ways. You need to show that you're willing to do the right thing. Tim Hudak and the Ontario PC caucus are committed to taking this province on a different path, a path that leads to jobs, a path that leads to a strong economy, to stability. The question is, are you? And if so, then the time is now. If you refuse to listen to us, will you please listen to Moody's, listen to Standard & Poor's, and change your course?
Minister of Finance. Be seated, please. Be seated, please. Deputy Premier.
The deficit from just over $19 billion to $15 billion. That's going to continue to go down according to the path we've laid out. We laid out in 2010 the path back to balance. We've overachieved in each year so far. There is no doubt that there are expenditure challenges, Mr. Speaker. I think working together, this legislature can address these challenges, Mr. Speaker. I think the official opposition ought to follow the advice of the Globe and Mail this morning and say, don't be irrelevant. Please come to the table and work with this government. We do need to get back to balance, Mr. Speaker. I think Ontarians expect that of us, Mr. Speaker. I think a number of Conservatives expect that of us, Mr. Speaker. I'm reminded that some Tories remain puzzled that the Leader of the Opposition came out against the budget as soon as it was introduced. Quote, Tim's position has left him out of being any relevant part of the news. I just wonder which Tory it was. Was it you? Was it her? Was it him? I don't know, Mr. Speaker. We're prepared to get this budget.
Thank you.